Greetings from the grandmothers of the Four Directions. This is Audri with another message, another reading from the grandmothers. Those of you that have been following the readings, this now is reading number 6. This particular reading picks up on the last reading where there was a conversation with the grandmothers, and you can always refer back to that on our YouTube site as a reference for where we're going. But primarily the grandmothers were talking about the importance of understanding that as we're shifting from third dimension into fifth dimension, we're passing through the fourth. And it's important to understand that the fourth dimension is the bridge. It is a dimensional bridge, if you will, that allows us to let go, if you would, of what was those things that hold us back, to move forward into the new energy that will propel us forward into the fifth dimension. Primarily, this bridge prepares us to shift from a connection that is so tight that holds us bound to what it takes to live in third dimension. And let me give you some examples of that. In the bridge space, or the fourth dimension, here we go, 14th, that's another whole channel way down the road. But in this fourth dimensional bridge, it's not what we know that's important. So the first thing is releasing our attachments to what is known or what we perceive as knowable. And that opens us to access the unknown and unknowable from a third dimensional standpoint. It also allows us to release expectations, because if you don't know, how can you expect? And the only way to access the unknowable is to release an expectation that's built on a third dimensional belief system. And fourth, from this, in this bridge, is the releasing of our connection to time as we know it. Time which pretty much follows 24-hour cycles, whether you're looking at any of the calendars, whether you're looking at a lunar calendar or Gregorian calendar, what have you, is connecting actually to a cosmic calendar that precedes and predates both of those calendars. So there is not the calendar as we know it in terms of timekeeping. So we're releasing our connection to time. Why? Because as we go from fourth to fifth dimension, what happens is what we understand as time is over. It shifts completely. You enter into a space of eternity. And that is because as our physical bodies are made pliable and made possible to make this shift, we then enter an eternal realm. And for those of you that have been studying the holographic information, if you go back to Now Time Prophecies, there are specific drawings that indicate the holograms, the holographic passage through which we've come. Then you'll begin to understand that nothing in us is outside of the experience of the universe. Therefore, as we shift into the fifth dimension, the limitations that this particular physical suit that we wear in third dimension, it can't hold us. It can't sustain the energy nor the vibration. What happens is, as we move to that, if we do not allow our light bodies to emerge, we find an increase in disease and disruption in the basic organ systems, in the basic skin itself, in the basic immune systems that it takes to hold the shell together. There's no wonder there's an increase in immune deficiencies on the planet at this time. So what does that mean? It has in this bridge space, has implications and ramifications way across the board. Let's start with the physical. The physical bodies now need to be prepared. We need to be prepared in the sense of moving away from the foods that weigh us down into the foods that allow us to move forward in much more lightness, not light as in bright light from the sun, but lightness as in weight. We're talking about weight now. So we're looking at more of the vegetables, more of the source protein that comes out of the vegetables and root fruits that and vegetables that we have on the planet. We're looking less and less at meat-based eating habits, only because the meat that we currently manufacture is not prepared in a way that the meat itself is meeting its light body. And so then the weight of that is holding us down. So as we begin to transition from a heavy, dense state to a lighter state, we'll be able to hold the higher frequencies and vibrations that are necessary for us to access knowledge and wisdom in a way that we haven't before. All right? So remember, food holds memory as well as what's in our psyche. Understand that our relationship to food holds a certain course of energy that's based on many, many, many years of belief systems. So as we release that, then what we're doing is we're allowing our light bodies to emerge. The other thing is that releasing the way we are in relationship with one another. In this sense is we are accessing now the crystal clusters. So opening ourselves to be aware that those who are our soulmates, who we've traveled before, especially when these folds of time, dimensions have occurred, we've traveled together. The power of the crystal clusters coming together is that the collective body of wisdom, each one having information that is so important. This collective body of wisdom helps us to know how to navigate. It helps us to remember back to source. It helps us to utilize the holographic information that is in us by removing the smudges, if you will, of third dimensional reality. Those things that separate us from ourselves and from the world around us. The other energy that is so important right now is understanding that moving from a self-based awareness, now we talked about this a little bit in previous channels, moving from a self-based consciousness is perhaps one of the most important things. In third dimension, everything is built around the identity. Everything is built around who we are, who we perceive ourselves to be, who the collective perceive ourselves to be, and that's how we measure everything in our life. That's how we measure our success, our failures, our goodness, our badness. All of that is in that context of identity. Some call it the ego. But it's the story of who we are, who we think we are, who we think we can become. Within that story is so much limitation as we bridge from fourth to fifth dimension. Because your story is not who you are. Your story will not hold. Because as you bridge from third dimension into fifth dimension, you'll find that who you think you are is nothing in the bigger story. Because what truly is happening is you are leaving the identity, your story of who you are, that makes your ego function in a certain way. You're leaving that, transcending that as you ascend. And as you do that, you are now connecting with not the self concept, but the source concept. So you're no longer living to serve yourself as in third dimensional consciousness, if you will, and whatever gets served, you served yourself, and maybe through that you'll serve some others and you'll help the world and everything goes well. Well, in the bridge space, it's about understanding yourself as source. And so there's nothing outside of belief. There's nothing outside of the knowable and unknowable. The polarities begin to collapse upon themselves because they don't exist. So this fourth dimensional space is giving us what we need to begin to shift, not only mentally, psychically, from an electromagnetic field, all of that. Our mental, everything. This gives us the space now to make this transition. The other thing is that in this space of source, it's no longer about what we do for ourselves that enables us to do for the world. Is now a complete flow of service. A complete flow of service, because it is an understanding that if you succeed in the old paradigm, then you got it. You know, if you're the best at whatever you do, you've got it. But that's not going to work in the fourth dimension as you're moving into the fifth. In this bridge space, who has to get it? Everybody. No one left behind. Why? Because the consciousness of the universe is perfection. The consciousness of the universe is about creation. Now, from a physics standpoint, we can understand that everything has a chaos theory. Everything succumbs to chaos theory as we understand it in third dimension. But in fourth dimension, moving into fifth dimension, there is no chaos. Understand that. There is no chaos. Everything is in the process of perfection. Whether it's in its birthing cycle, whether it must die out to allow a greater cycle to come forward. It doesn't even express itself like that. I'm using third dimensional language to try to bring forward a concept that in the natural flow of the universe, there is no polarity. Things don't exist as good as or bad. They exist. And they exist for creation. The source energy of the universe is in love with creation, is in love with the experience of creation for the higher and higher and higher attainment of all life. And that's the other thing. When we move out of the self-contained story of who we are, we're able to embrace the bigger universal picture of what we are a part of, and indeed who we are, because then we are it. Everything is in this process. The trees, the grass, the animals, people, stones, crystals, everything is in this process. So in this space then of a universal awareness and connection and essence of all things is where we reside. Now, why is that important? It's important because as we make the shift out of this story and bridge ourselves into the next story, our concept of life expands. Our concept of what is source even shifts. And it shifts at a time when the entire universe is awakening to a greater aspect of itself. In other words, there is an energy of creation that is as big as the last Big Bang, if you want to think about that from a third dimensional story. The last Big Bang of the universe. Here we are again. There is another Big Bang in the universe that is occurring. It is about the outsourcing of all that is through every entity that exists at a cosmic, whether it's a simple nuclear particle to a planet or a star. It's all happening now. We're going to see tremendous shifts in how we even can visibly hold the world. Colors are going to change and become much more electric, if you will, from a third dimensional standpoint. What we are capable of as physical beings now is going to be so much bigger because we are bigger. We are bigger because we are not only accessing what we can do with the physical body, but now our electromagnetic sphere is so expanded that we can work from those extremes of that energy as well, and every space in between. And so the most important thing we wanted to deliver today, if we take nothing else away from what we're talking about, is that there's an incredible expansion in the universe, and that is being mirrored in the expansion of yourself. There are things that you can do to support yourself right now physically. We talked about diet. We also talked about relationships, looking around to see if the relationships that you are engaged in truly mirror where you're going. That's part of what we're shifting now, because we have to make way for the crystal clusters to come together. And that means relationships that support you in your process. The other thing is the mental tension that will be created in this process, because our mind wants to stay with our old story. Our mind, our mental body, is the most committed aspect of who we are as human beings. It holds our stories no matter what. So we can't make the shift by relying on our mind. So we have to understand that sometimes things are not going to make sense. In fact, most times from here forward are not going to make sense from a third dimensional story, from the mind. The only place it will make sense and give you comfort is when you slip into the heart, into the zone of the heart that allows, right here is where your field of energy expands out into the universe uninterrupted. Nothing can stop that flow. So not only is it expanding out, it's bringing in. So reliance on the mental has to shift. It's going to be a gradual, incremental process. As we always say, be gentle and kind with yourself and with others in this process. Also, be aware of what energies support you in this process and what energies are not supporting of you, because you will not be able to hold on to those relationships. It doesn't mean you don't love them. And that's important to get too. Because in this bridge space, it's all about love. It's all about service. It's not a self journey. But be kind with all people. But allow yourself to bring in those people, those spirits on the planet right now that you have traveled with through time eternal. Especially at the points when major shift and changes were happening on the planet. It's in that collective gathering of the crystal cluster that the work that you're here to do to help humanity make its shift, and it's not just humanity, it's all life, it's the earth, it's the cosmos, that collectively you hold that memory. That's very important to get. When you come together, it is the energy that flows through your DNA. And it's not just energy. It is actual crystalline formations that act to magnetize the knowing. Okay? It's the combination of the crystalline formation in the DNA with the saline solution, if you will, of the universe that allows the language between the crystals to begin to communicate. So the crystal clusters then get a whole nother level of communication that does not come from the mind, but comes from something that gets unlocked within the very DNA of each person. So again, today the bottom line is opening yourself to expand, opening yourself to know that change is here, to trust that, to believe that, no matter what others say. Things are so potentially filled right now. The planet is like a woman in her 9th month of a pregnancy. Any moment, the great boom is going to happen. The great birthing is happening, and in truth, it's happening in the incremental process. But remember this, when it's time for a baby to be born, it's not the mother's body that signals the child that it's time to come. It's the baby that makes the decision for the moment of birthing. And that is biologically true. So here we are. We have to ask ourselves, are we ready to access the bridge that is right there before us? Are we ready to move forward in the wholeness of who we are? It's going to take faith. It's going to take trust. And remember, everywhere you go, you are now in service. At every level. Serving in the self by allowing the great expansion to happen. Service to each other by recognizing who we are. Service to Mother Earth and to the planet by always accessing that which is available to help us to create, to become a part of this creation experience that is bridging us from the 3rd dimension to the 5th dimension. Be gentle with yourself. One step at a time. Breathe. Take the time to just release. Release. It's a constant state of release on the one hand as memories are flooding in on the other. Okay? It's a constant in-breath and out-breath. And with that we say, to God be the